Just gonna keep starting new series until I die. Never finish anything. Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I will be going over my reading stats for the first half of 2021. So in my stats update of last year, I had my desktop and kind of took you through my entire spreadsheet, and things are a little bit different now. I have a laptop that I will be screen recording from and showing you my new kind of improved spreadsheet. So I'll be going through my different sections and as well as showing you what I keep track of, the different graphs I keep, how I keep my pivot tables and everything else. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I guess to get started, I use Google Sheets for my reading spreadsheet because I'm cheap and I don't want to pay for Excel. I originally had each year broken up into different sheets within a larger workbook. Since then, I've learned a lot more about pivot tables and how they work, and I've decided the best way for me to stay organized with all of my reading is to keep just a rolling year by year in one sheet that I can pull all of my stuff from. Starting in the upper left corner of my spreadsheet, you can see here I have the reading year, which is the year I read it, as well as the title, the year it was published, the day I started reading it, the day I finished it. The days read is just a quick sell minus sell. I use a lot of if statements just because I continue these formulas all the way through the column. So I like to use an if statement to make it look a little less busy and to have it automatically catch when I add stuff. It just makes my life a little bit easier. I have the page count, which I generally get from Goodreads, but if I am reading a physical copy of the book, I'll just grab it from the physical copy. I have audio length for my audiobooks, cumulative pages, which again is just how many pages I have read in total that year at each point. The reading rate, which is just the number of pages in that book divided by the days it took me to read it. This made a lot more sense for me when I was only reading one book at a time. It would kind of give me a good idea of how quickly I was getting through a book based on the time of year or whether it was the book I was reading. Now that I've incorporated a lot more audiobooks into my reading selection and I am, reading a physical book as well as listening to an audiobook at the same time, this piece of information doesn't really do a whole lot for me anymore. Next to that, I have genre, subgenre if I feel like it's warranted, and then going over I have where it is in a series, whether it is a standalone book, the start of a series, the middle of a series, or the end of a series, just out of curiosity's sake. I have a column where I can put an X in if it is an audiobook, which gets taken into account in a few of my graphs and some calculations. I have my rating for the book, which I've talked about this in some other videos before. I don't really like rating or my rating system or just kind of the idea of rating books in general. I still kind of keep up with it and I still look at it from time to time, but I'm not a huge fan. The next column I have is the price of the book if I paid for it. So this is basically just how much money I've spent on books. And then in savings, this is books that I get from the library typically. So audiobooks and ebooks that I am borrowing through the Libby app, I'll put in the price of what they would be on Google Books because that was the platform that I was using to buy books before I started using Libby. Now that we're through all of those, can take a quick look at my 2021 year. You can see that I've colored a few of these cells. I basically just colored the first 30 cells of this year because my reading goal at the beginning of the year was 30 books. So I just kind of wanted to give myself just a quick visual of how far along I was in that goal. As you can see, I'm past it and it's only halfway through the year. My new goal for 2021 is 60 books, so I may go in and put in another 30 cells in this same color to again just kind of give me that quick visual of where I'm at. So you can see here all of my numbers so far. One example of why I put in these X's is in this cell here. You can see this is my reading rate cell. So I have it in here that if the audiobook column is marked with an X, then I don't put anything in that cell because you don't read pages in an audiobook. So it's not really worth it for me to show that. So I think that's pretty much everything that's interesting on my kind of raw data page. Again, this is where I just kind of put in all the data about the books I'm reading, and then all the other pages in this workbook pull from this sheet specifically. So looking at quick stats, I have some kind of quick stats up in the top left corner here. I have it broken out by year. I have my average rating, my average page length, median page length, my most common genre, which right now I'm just doing manually. If anybody has any ideas of how to find the most common string phrase in Google Sheets without having to do a bunch of coding, I'd be into it. I also have my percent audiobook. So this is basically just how many of the books I am reading, how many of the books I've ingested, I guess, have been through audiobooks and through non-audio. I also, I just came up with a really good way to do that. I was also wanting to put into here my percent that I was getting from the library, and I was trying to think of a way to do it, but I just thought of a way to do it, so I'm gonna do it real quick and come back to you.
What follows is a brief construction montage. We hope you enjoyed this brief construction montage.
Alright, so as with everything, that took me way too long to figure out, even though I had already had the idea. So I just used another count if statement like I used in my percent audio for everything in that savings column that was above 0. I divided that by just the total amount of books that I am reading in 2021. So the nice thing about using stuff like count if statements and whatnot is that you can have it continually update without having to expand your formula range. I don't know if anybody's gonna do this, but if they are, there you go. So I guess that's all my quick stats that I go through. You can see that I'm having a pretty decent reading year as far as my ratings go. I'm reading shorter books than I have in the past 2 years. I'm reading a lot of nonfiction. So scrolling down into my pivot tables, I have my total sum of pages, which I just use for a pie chart that you'll see on the next screen. I have my total book count, which I'm just kind of more just interested in as far as what books I'm reading the most of per genre. I have my average rating by genre. So again, just kind of curious. I also have my standard deviation of ratings in each genre. At some point, once I kind of gather enough data, I'd like to kind of do some statistical analysis to see what genre I typically rate the highest. And then I also have a pivot table of just that column with the series standalone, series end, series start, just again for a pie chart on the next page. So there's all my pivot tables and my kind of quick stats. So going into graphs, we'll start at the top here with my genre breakdown. I do this by page count. I feel like if I'm, reading a 500-page fantasy book versus a 200-page romance, I should say that I read more fantasy. So, I don't know, that makes sense in my brain. If that doesn't make sense in other people's brains, then whatever. You can see here that I've become a lot more genre diverse as I've kind of become involved in BookTube, learned more about, other genres, gotten recommendations in other genres, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. The next graph you see here, that is my reading rate. Like I said, the reading rate thing doesn't really make sense anymore now that I read, or now that I listen to audiobooks at the same time. Because you can see all of these gaps I have in this graph are audiobooks that I listen to. So will I keep doing this graph? I don't know. We'll go down into the series breakdown. Looks like this year I've read a lot of standalones. I think this is probably mostly due to the huge increase in nonfiction that we see. I'm listening to a lot of reference books and biographies, and those are typically not in a series. So I don't know what's happening to all these series that I start, but I never seem to finish them. So that's kind of fun. Just gonna keep starting new series until I die. Never finish anything. And the last graph I have is a little histogram of the year the books I'm reading are published. I hate the way these look. They look so busy, and that is just because when you do a histogram, for some reason Google Sheets automatically formats the labels with 2 decimal places. And so far, all I've been able to find online, the only way to fix that is to actually go in and program in your graphs with the Google developer. There's no way to do it in like the little edit tool, and the little edit tool here that's like user-friendly. I'm not a coder or a programmer or whatever you want to call it. I don't do that. So I don't really know how to fix this, but it is what it is. But if you just look at it as a picture and just ignore the numbers, I use 5-year bins for my histogram. The 2019 one I have going from 1950 to 2020. Oh, you know what I just realized? I never got this histogram to go to 2021. We will need to go to horizontal axis. The max of this needs to be 2025, because like I said, I go in 5-year bins, so if I only go to 2021, it's gonna mess that up. But now that that's in there, now all my books are included. But anyways, going back to here, I have from 1950 to 2020. For 2020, I went from 1930 to 2020 because I had Brave New World all the way at the back. I decided to stay with 1950 in 2021 just because I didn't want, probably should go back and change it, but I don't really want to. I'm not a statistician, I'm not an actuary, like come at me if you're that into statistics, but I just do this for fun. But I mean, you can see that I generally stick with newer releases going back 10-ish years. 2020 I had a lot of catching up to do because I started really getting into reading again, and there were a lot of backlog books that I had to pick up. In this current year, I'm sticking to a lot more newer releases. I almost forgot my Gantt chart, my pride and joy. So I was so excited when I figured this out. This was after I think the first time I showed off my Google Sheets kind of document, someone suggested that I should do a sparkline graph. I've done that for 2019, 2020, and for 2021, it's obviously much bigger because I've read many more books. And something I've done here with the different colors, again, using that column of audiobooks with the X, I have that change the colors. So if it is, you can see this here, if it is an X, it's purple. If it's not, then it's orange. That's what the colors mean. This has become a lot more fun of a tool for me since I have been layering my reading with audiobooks and physical books. I can see how long it's taken me to listen to stuff, to read stuff. It's crazy to me how short these bars are compared to years past. Like, it's cool to see how many more books I'm able to read, getting into reading so much more. I don't know, it's cool. I love stats. I love being able to parse apart this data and look at it in something that's meaningful and cool to look at. And then this sheet is just my drop-down menus. So that's not exciting. But yes, end on a pretty little picture. All the books I've read this year, when I read them in the year. I think it's super cool, it's super fun, and I would love to hear anything in the comments about anything you guys keep track of, whether you keep it track in a spreadsheet or in a reading journal or just Goodreads. But I love my spreadsheet. I have finally found a system that works for me and I like it. Comment if you have any questions about my spreadsheet or if you want to know anything more. Probably not. This seems like a little intense for just reading, but I like messing around in spreadsheets. I think it's really fun. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.